Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. If you haven't been here before, my name is Julie and I primarily make content surrounding topics such as mental health, makeup, as well as music. Today's video is entirely mental health related and I am going to be interviewing my mom. Yay, here's my mom. Say
Hi.
hello. So before we get into the interview, I thought that I could briefly introduce you all to my mom. So the first thing I'm going to be asking you for this interview is to just tell us a little bit about yourself, whether that's your age range, job, lifestyle, and interests.
59 years old, and I'm a teacher. My interests are I like to color and do artistic things. And I like to go to the beach and I like to go on walks and I like reading and writing. Those are things I like to do.
Awesome. All right. So today's video topic is driving phobias. You may have noticed that I have agoraphobia and I talk a lot about it on my channel, but there are other types of phobias out there that affect people as well. And driving phobias unfortunately seem to be highly stigmatized and also misperceived, and people don't fully have an understanding of what they are, why they happen, and how to treat them. So I want to shed some light on this process today by showcasing my mom's experience dealing with a driving phobia. So let's get into it. So the first question I want to ask you is, what mental health conditions are you diagnosed with and what have those been like for you?
I've been diagnosed with OCD and I've been diagnosed with anxiety. And OCD at one point in my life kind of took charge of everything because my obsessions with having things in order and keeping things neat kind of got in the way of me living. And so I decided to go to therapy and go on medication to help with that. That's kind of where that's at. Anxiety, I think I have anxiety based around the OCD as well. So.
Yes, and OCD is a severe anxiety disorder. Although it isn't in the DSM, it would make sense that if you have OCD, you're going to deal with anxiety because that is a major part of it. But good job explaining all of that. I think that's very helpful for other people who may have similar conditions. All right, the next question I have for you is, what specifically has been helpful for you in regard to your mental health treatment? So you talked about therapy and medication being helpful. Can you talk a little bit more about what specific aspects of therapy have been helpful for you?
Throughout time, reframing the way I think about things and just kind of planning ahead and making sure, like, if I get into a situation that can bring out my OCD, things that I can kind of talk to myself and say to kind of prevent me from going to that place to cope.
Okay, so those are the things that have been helpful for you. That's good. So now that we've talked in general a little bit about your mental health background personally, I want to get into the driving phobia. So when was it specifically that you realized that you could not handle driving on the highway? Because I just want to specify that my mom can drive and does deal with driving anxiety, but her driving phobia in her case is specific to the highway. So I'm just asking her about her experience driving on the highway.
Probably in my mid to late 30s, I could still drive on the highway, but I would have a physical panic attack where my feet would freeze up on the pedal and my body, I would just feel like all tensed up. And my heart would race and things like that.
So you had a lot of physiological symptoms, which panic attacks can be mental or physical or a mix of both. It sounds like it is very physical for you. What happens?
It is, and it's overpowering. And in fact, at first, I didn't know what was wrong, and I went to a regular medical doctor.
Right. Yeah, a lot of people do for when they have panic attacks or they think they're having a heart attack and it's actually just a panic attack. So it's interesting that you didn't even know what it was, because driving phobias are not often talked about, and panic attacks in response to certain stressors and triggers aren't always talked about either. For context, my mom is in her 50s now, so I would say she's been dealing with this for at least a couple of decades. Is that right?
Yeah,
okay.
That's probably true.
And so you talked about the physical symptoms that you endure with a panic attack, because that was my next question. I wanted to know if there are any mental symptoms, like if there's feelings or if there's specific thoughts that you register having in those moments.
Yes. I register, oh no, what if I can't press the pedal? What if I can't, what if I come to a complete stop on the highway? And I also have a fear of there's not an exit close enough ahead. So I'm nervous that, now I can't get off. I don't have an out.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense because when I did my video on here about my agoraphobia, I talked about the thoughts within it when I go out, and a lot of them were what if thoughts, like what if this happens? And it's hard with the driving phobia because it's so logical because you're behind the wheel, you're operating a vehicle. So if something were to happen, you logically, realistically would be in danger. So part of that fear is rational, even though there's a piece of it that might be a little more excessive than for the average person. So this really is a difficult condition to treat because you are driving a car.
Right.
Did you have more to add?
Just that through therapy, doing the coloring and doing just self-soothing stuff like doing breathing exercises when I drive and visualizing driving on the highway without going on the highway. Those things are helpful, but it's still really hard, and I have to really push myself and have a lot of self-talk in my head to get me through the experience, and I still do have those physical symptoms while I'm going on the highway.
So what my mom is talking about here, she used a bunch of different examples of things that have been helpful to her in her mental health treatment for this phobia. She's talking about exposure, and if you haven't watched my Agoraphobia Adventure series, you get to see me do exposure and see how anxious I get. So not only is it hard to engage in exposure and do something that makes us nervous or uncomfortable, but beyond that, we have to access our coping skills and utilize them so that we don't have a panic attack. But it is possible that that can happen and still should not deter us from doing those activities. We may just have to scale back with how high up we go on our fear hierarchy for exposure, which some of you have heard me talk about before. So my mom is very brave. You can tell she's been in therapy. She's using all the buzzwords like mindfulness and visualization. And those are big pieces, especially for exposure with phobias, of just envisioning the triggering stimuli in a safe space, that being a therapist's office. That can even make you anxious, and processing that and talking about it and going from there before doing the exposure in other aspects is really important. So I appreciate that you mentioned all of those things. When did you start seeing a therapist?
When this happened, and then I couldn't drive on the highway anymore, so probably like, my mid to late 30s.
Okay, so you've been seeing therapists for a while. Has it been consistent or has it been on and off?
It was consistent for a while, and then I was able to actually drive on the highway for a while. Probably between my 40s and into my 50s, I was successful, and then it got worse again, and I stopped going to therapy when it got better, but then when it got worse, I started going to therapy again.
Good. And I think that that is a good recommendation for all of you out there. Therapy doesn't have to be something we do every single week on the money, but when we're feeling better, it's okay to not go as often or to not go for a while. But when we're not feeling so great, we definitely should get back in there. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. I also wanted to ask, was there a specific traumatic event you can think of that may have taken the form of a car accident or driving alone at night that you think really contributed to the onset of this driving phobia?
When I really had trouble driving on the highway, one night I was writing a paper for college, and I was going to school at night. I went to my sister's house in Nashua, and I drove on Route 3, and I had to come home, and it was like 2 o'clock in the morning because we worked on the paper all night. And when I drove home, it was pretty dark and it was late, and I had to like put the radio on, open the window, and I talked myself through exit to exit and was capable of getting back there. But ever since then, I think the fear has been heightened.
Yes.
Since that experience.
Yes, and typically traumatic events can result in phobias. Phobias usually are highly correlated with that happening. So I think it's important that you recognize an event like that happen to better understand what is going on. And I also appreciate when you mentioned that it did get better over time and then it didn't, and so you got back in therapy, because we can have a relapse in that and it's nothing to feel guilty or ashamed about. Phobias are really hard to treat and maintain our recovery around the distressing symptoms. And especially later in life, developmentally, neurologically, we go through so many changes. So it would make sense that your body and your brain are going through changes, and that your response to those triggers may have differed. But I'm glad that you are getting the help that you need. The last question that I wanted to ask you was in regard to stigma, and my mom and I have talked about this a lot. I'm trying to break it today with my Mental Health Matters shirt. My question to you is, how have people responded when you've told them about the phobia, and did they understand?
Some people, when I told one of my friends, I was actually driving when I told her, and she actually understood, and she talked to me the whole ride and got me through. And I did have a time where I was afraid to drive over bridges, and she helped me to breathe. But then I have friends too that, say, oh, can you come up and see me? Do you still have that thing, or is it all gone? So there's the broad spectrum.
Okay, so it sounds like you've had a mix. You've had some people that are supportive and they may not fully understand what it's like to have a driving phobia, but maybe they get the piece of just having anxiety or having a trigger and they're there to support you. But it sounds like your other friends can't fully connect to it, maybe because they don't go through it or they don't know anyone who has. And so that's why it's really important to make videos like this, or just to be a mental health advocate online about your own conditions, because we assume that people talk about this enough, but we're not talking about it enough. So that's my inspiration for making this video today. I think you did an excellent job answering these questions and shed some light on what it's like to have this. And again, on this channel, we are recovery focused, so we're always going to talk about treatment and progress that I have made, or if someone else is on my channel, progress they have made. But finally, I just wanted to say, did you have any last thoughts to add or advice to others who may be watching this that are struggling with a driving phobia?
That it's definitely helpful to go to therapy, and when you find the right therapist who can take you step by step. Like, I've had therapists that have rushed me too much and wanted me to just jump in the car and go. Mm-hmm. And I've had therapists that have taken me step by step and done practice sessions in therapy, mm-hmm. and then practice sessions just sitting in the car myself, and just like the slower the better, because I think it's long lasting when you do it that way.
Yep, absolutely makes sense. And from what I've read, the research shows that gradual exposure, where the client is willing to achieve these fear hierarchy steps at their own pace, is more effective. Although there are programs and therapists who believe in more extreme measures, and this can have results happen quicker, it doesn't mean that they will be as well preserved as doing gradual exposure and keeping up with said exposure, because the less we expose ourselves, the more anxious we get and the triggers can come in. So I'm glad that you were committed to doing exposure, and that and other therapeutic strategies have been helpful for you. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to my mom for being here. Please give this video a like if you enjoyed it. I'd love for you to subscribe to my channel as well. You can follow my social medias down below. Oh, I'm just over here. My Instagram is Julie_counseling. My Twitter is Julie Counseling with no underscore. And my coaching Instagram is Julie_coaching, as I'm a certified personal trainer now. Please leave me a comment down below letting me know if this was helpful for you. Let's have a cool conversation, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Bye, guys.